She stood at the edge of the group, shoulders hunched beneath a loose military-issue shawl, her eyes flickering up toward the human officers that passed. The other alien girls, rescued, recovered, registered, stood straighter, brighter, offering hopeful glances or timid smiles. But not her. She kept her head low, and her tunic drawn close. She dared not stand in the light too long. The scars across her arms and neck still ached when touched by open air, proof of what she'd endured before this place. They weren't fresh anymore, but healing didn't mean forgetting. The humans had built this refugee intake station on a quiet moon. Green skies above, calming holograms lining the walls. But peace meant little to someone who had survived only by being invisible. Still, part of her had come. She had sat through the scans, filled out the silent forms, let their machines record her history, though she lied and said nothing had happened. She was just another displaced body. That's how she preferred it. But when the assignment postings were announced, when names were called and girls were chosen, none of them were hers. Not her false name, not her registry code. They passed her by. Again and again. Her stomach twisted. Not in jealousy, she didn't believe she deserved it anyway, but in the cruel, familiar echo of being left behind. Of not being seen. Her arms tightened around her middle as she slipped quietly behind one of the loading crates outside the station wall. If she could cry, she would have. But her species had burned the ability to produce tears generations ago in the fires of war. Instead, she just sat, silent, broken, trying not to feel anything at all. That's when the footsteps approached. Slow, barely crunching the gravel. Not the march of a soldier, but the hesitant, careful steps of someone who didn't want to scare her. She didn't turn. She assumed they weren't for her. Until a voice, quiet, male, human, spoke beside her. "I've been looking for you." Her breath caught. She didn't respond. He waited, then crouched beside the crate, just far enough not to invade her space. "You didn't come when your name was called," he added, voice softer than before. "Thought maybe you didn't hear it." Slowly, painfully, she turned her head to meet his eyes. He wasn't in uniform, not the kind the others wore. He had a worn jacket, clean hands, tired features. The kind of face you didn't expect to look at you with kindness. And yet, there it was. That warmth. Like he saw her, not the silence, not the scars, but her. "You must have the wrong girl," she muttered, voice low, rough from disuse. "My name wasn't called." He reached slowly into the pocket of his coat, pulled out a small data slip, and held it up. It projected her ID. Her face. Her file. And beside it, a match. His signature. His sponsor seal. "It was," he said gently. "I called it." Her hands shook. "Why?" she asked, before she could stop herself. The question sounded too desperate, too raw. But he didn't flinch. "Because I read your file," he answered simply. "And because I don't care what you think you have to hide." She flinched. He looked away for a moment, gave her space again, then stood and offered his hand. Not demanding. Not coaxing. Just there. Open. Waiting. "Will you come with me?" She stared at that hand for a long time. She didn't take it, but she stood. Slowly. Her legs were stiff, her shawl slipped slightly from one shoulder, revealing the ridged scars running up her collarbone. She tensed, expected him to look away or wince. But instead, he looked right at them. Calmly. Kindly. And said nothing. As if they were just another part of her, like her eyes or her voice or her name. He guided her gently through the departure gate, his voice always quiet, always level. No questions. No pushing. Only presence. His ship was small. Clean. Worn at the edges, but well-loved. He showed her the room that would be hers, not a cage, not a bunk, but a real room, with a bed, a small window, a drawer full of clothes in neutral colors and soft fabric. She stood there, unmoving. "You can lock the door from the inside," he said simply, then set the key card on the desk. "And the bed's yours. No one else's." She looked at him, still afraid. But something in her chest trembled, not from fear, but from disbelief. She sat on the edge of the bed after he left. The mattress was soft. Her tunic slipped again, and this time she didn't fix it right away. Her fingers traced the marks along her skin, crisscrossing lines from restraints, burns, impact points. She had learned long ago to keep them hidden. Pretty girls were chosen first. Clean girls. Quiet girls. She was only the last of those. When he brought her food that evening, he didn't hover. He just placed the tray down and said, "You don't have to finish it, but it's yours." She nodded. Later, when she stepped into the washroom, the mirror flickered on, and she startled at the sight of her own reflection. She hadn't seen her face clearly in months. The long white hair, the pale, angular features of her people, the dark marred patterns on her neck and shoulder. She reached out, gently pressed a palm to the glass. She didn't feel like someone who belonged in a home. But when she returned to her room, a folded garment sat on the bed. Not a uniform. Not a tunic. A simple cotton dress, long-sleeved, soft gray. Modest, comfortable, clearly chosen with care. Beside it, an envelope. Inside, no orders, no demands, just a short, handwritten message. You don't need to hide. You were already chosen. Just as you are. Her knees nearly gave out as she sat. Not out of pain, but out of something deeper. A wound that had never been allowed to close. She put the dress on. It fit. Not perfectly, but enough. It wasn't designed to make her look owned. It was made so she could feel warm. Days passed. Slowly, gently, she learned the ship's rhythm. He gave her space, but always spoke kindly. When she finally asked to help with something, anything, he smiled and showed her how to organize supplies. Only if you want to, he reminded. You don't owe me anything. She nodded. But part of her wanted to be useful again. Not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to stay. One night, she found herself in the viewing bay, watching stars drift silently across the glass. He stood beside her. Not too close, but enough. Do you regret choosing me? She asked. He turned to look at her, not shocked, not impatient, just waiting. No, he said. Not even a little. But she touched her arm, fingers brushing over the uneven ridges of her skin. I'm damaged. You're alive, he said softly. And that's more than most. She looked at him then, really looked. Saw the scars on his hands, the faded mark along his jaw. He wasn't flawless either. But he carried his pain differently, like it didn't define him. Maybe she could learn that too. Weeks later, she came to breakfast wearing that same soft gray dress, washed and ironed. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her scars no longer hidden. When he looked at her, he smiled, but not in pity. In welcome. In quiet joy. She sat down across from him. No fear in her posture. No shame in her voice. Just the beginning of something new. Thank you, she whispered. He didn't ask what for. He just answered, gently, firmly. You never had to be afraid again.